Merci à la presse. I'm very sorry because I did have to make some comments while delivering my speech. But I will be patient, and I will ask. Yes, I will ask for your understanding because I have to deliver this speech in English. That is very important. A statement of elegance electoral data in the making and warning on the call for a military coup d'etat in Cameroon. As we get closer to year 2025, a crucial year if ever there was one for Cameroon, we see speeches, maneuvers that are extremely worrying for the future peace and stability of our country. Scenarios for a coup d'etat are being kindly put forward by the party in power without the impression that the authorities of the republic, that is, those who are in principle in charge of the interests of the state of the common, and the common good of all Cameroonians are concerned. The complicit apathy of these authorities has led us today to a situation where we are faced with two coup d'etat scenarios. One, the electoral coup d'etat is in full preparation with Electoral in charge of implementing it. The other, the military coup d'etat, is a supported and undenounced exhortation that will fuel temptations. It is around these two observations that I will organize my statement. First of all, an electoral coup d'etat in the making. Through the various elections scheduled for the coming years, municipal, legislative, and presidential, Cameroonians will have an exceptional opportunity to rid themselves peacefully and through the ballot box of a regime that has spared them no suffering, humiliation, or injustice of any kind for several decades. Very simply, voters in the various forthcoming elections will be saying this to this ruthless, incompetent, corrupt, arrogant, and depressing regime. Enough is enough. Or, on the contrary, we want more suffering, more unsolved and unpunished murders, more injustice, and more of your contempt. It will be a vote for dignity and renaissance, or for resignation and total despair. Aware of what is at stake in these forthcoming elections, the outcome of which is foresees in the light of the extraordinary rise in awareness among Cameroonians. The frightened and panicked government is firing on all cylinders, but in an attempt to avert the fate it deserves in view of the disastrous situation into which it has plunged the country, and which all receipts, such as tribalism and corruption, are no longer able to quell. The government has embarked on the preemptive electoral coup. Yes, the Director General of Electoral, Mr. Revivez, and the members of the Electoral Council are preparing before our very eyes and those of the international community an authentic electoral coup d'etat. The criminal actions of the governing bodies of this institution, which is supposed to be impartial organizers of the game, of the electoral game indeed, can be seen in the many violations of electoral law. They are trampling underfoot the Constitution of Cameroon and the electoral laws with the clearly stated aim of enabling once again the CPDM to maintain itself illegally and illegitimately in power. The following is a long but not exhaustive list of illegal acts by electoral officials whose political objective is to distort the results of the forthcoming election to the benefit of the CPDM, and which undisputedly establishes the elector's electoral data in no figment of the imagination. 1,000 registered voters. 2. Preemptive announcement by the Director General of Electoral, Mr. Jesus, that the extraordinary mobilization of Cameroonians who are massively registering on the electoral register prove futile. That is, not change the electorate because after grooming out of, for instance, 200,000 new registered voters, there will only be 50,000 left. In violation of the presumption of innocence. 10. One Mr. Vesta Mohammed, known as Kosovo, village chief and CPDM militant, was caught in the act of electoral card fraud with the presence of electoral and police officers in charge of producing national identity cards, observed by the population and the media on 25 April 2024 in Mansana, in North Division, Western region. After I had demonstrated with figures to back it up in my end of year message for 2022, and at the close of our party's convention, the scandalous manipulation of registration figures to the advance of the CPDM immediately, and as if magic, the number of registered voters published on 27 March by Electoral for the period of from January to March 2024 took a spectacular leap forward. Except that this magical leap, far from clearing Electoral of accusation of collusion with CPDM regime, in the plot against electoral democracy, discredited it once for all. In fact, I was denouncing that in more than 10 years, I was denouncing the fact that in more than 10 years, from January 2012 to 21st of December 2022, and during the year 2023, Electoral claimed to have been able to register only 28,000 people a year. Held in their pride, Electoral's leaders decided to increase voters' registration between January and March to around 50,000 new voters per month. This figure is still far below reality. On 27 March by Electoral, for the period of from January to March 2024, took a spectacular leap forward. Except that this magical leap, far from clearing Electoral of accusation of collusion with the CPDM regime, in the plot against the electoral democracy, discredited it once for all. In fact, I was denouncing that in more than 10 years, I was denouncing the fact that in more than 10 years, from January 2012 to 21st of December 2022, and during the year 2023, Electoral claimed to have been able to register only 28,000 people per year. Hurt in their pride,
Elecam's leaders decided to increase voters' registration between January and March to around 50,000 new voters per month. This figure is still far below reality, given the huge popular mobilization for voter registration that any objective observer can attest to across the country since January of this year. In the Electoral, for example, according to Elecam's own statistical data, Elecam's objective for 2024 is to register 132,684 new voters. However, as of 1st May 2024, that is at the halfway point, after 4 months out of 8 months that registration takes, Elecam had already registered 87.072 new voters, which means that it has already achieved 65.62% of its objectives for 2024 in the Electoral. And yet, the registration dynamic is rising in the Electoral and in the rest of the country. We therefore expect Elecam not only to achieve 100% of its objective for 2024, but at least to double those objectives. The expectation for the electorate is at least 12 million registered voters by 21st August 2024. In addition to manipulating the number of Cameroonians on the electoral rolls and refusing to publish the national electoral roll as required by the law, Elecam is plotting against our nation in perfect complicity with the CPDM, the government of the Republic, and a number of political actors. In a style of his own, the Minister of Territorial Administration, in defiance of the Constitution, Article 3 of which stated that, unquote, political parties and groups shall help the electorate in the making of voting decision, end of quote. And on 2nd May 2024, he openly threatened, unquote, rogue politicians against any attempt to perniciously manipulate public opinion with the view to disturbing public order, end of quote. He then revealed that he had instructed the administrative authority to no longer tolerate registration made by, unquote, certain politicians in search of notoriety, end of quote. According to Section 4 of the Electoral Code, Elections Cameroon shall be an independent body responsible for the organization, management and supervision of all elections and referendum operations, end of quote. As a result of this provision, Elections Cameroon shall have legal personality and management autonomy. So, where does it come from that the Minister of Territorial Administration, a CPDM militant, receives in his office without the members of the Electoral Commission, the President of the Electoral Council, and the Director General of Elecam, all of whom are CPDM militants, for a consultation, unquote, on the progress of voter registration with a view to forthcoming electoral elections in our country, unquote. Or more seriously, can Elecam, a supposedly independent electoral body with management autonomy conferred by law, submit the electoral process for which it is legally responsible to the Minister of Territorial Administration, who is an actor in the electoral system in the same way as the political parties, to the point that the letter takes the liberty to declaring in the press release that, unquote, he noted with satisfaction that the electoral process is proceeding normally, end of quote, and that Elecam holds regular consultations with all the actors in the electoral process. This is yet another serious violation of the electoral law by Mr. Eric Esuse, the Director General, and Mr. Eno Abrams Egbe, the President of Electoral Council of Elecam. While the law guarantees the independence of the electoral body in order to protect it from any suspicion, curiously, it is its main leaders who are organizing its submission, its subservience to the CPDM government. This is a serious fault that must be sanctioned both by the Electoral Council and the government. The Director General of Elecam and the President of the Electoral Council have betrayed their oath. They must satisfaction that the electoral process is proceeding normally, end of quote, and that Elecam holds regular consultations with all the actors in the electoral process. This is yet another serious violation of the electoral law by Mr. Eric Esuse, the Director General, and Mr. Eno Abrams Egbe, the President of Electoral Council of Elecam. While the law guarantees the independence of the electoral body in order to protect it from any suspicion, curiously, it is its main leaders who are organizing its submission, its subservience to the CPDM government. This is a serious fault that must be sanctioned both by the Electoral Council and the government. The Director General of Elecam and the President of the Electoral Council have betrayed their oath. They must resign or be dismissed to preserve what shred of credibility Elecam still has. In perfect synchronization with the MINAT, the Minister of Territorial Administration, in the same day of 2nd of May 2024, the CPDM Mayor of Yaoundé 7, Mr. Augustin Tamba, used threat and violence to force Elecam staff, Cameroonians who had come to register to vote in his municipality, and CRM volunteers who were inviting people to register, to live in flagrant violation of the provisions of the Constitution relating to the right of all citizens to settle anywhere and the freedom of movement. Mayor Augustin Tamba, who in any case does not have the power of judicial police officer, demanded that citizens present in front of Elecam counters provide a curious document prior to any registration, which he called a residence card. To illegally demand such a document from citizens in their own country is enough to demonstrate the disarray of the current regime and its tribalistic excesses, which reached climax in 2018 and from which the country is still suffering the strength. How long will we continue to live with and put up with these unacceptable excesses? How long will we continue to live with and put up with these unacceptable excesses? In the wake of Electoral, the government and the CPDM are ostensibly campaigning against voter registration and believe that the elections are a waste of time. All these serious acts show that within the regime are haunting by the prospect of the defeat of the CPDM and its ally in 2025, given their catastrophic records, and above all, the awakening of the Cameroonian people, and do not want the election scheduled for next year to be held in our country. In fact, they appear to be implicit supporters of those who are publicly calling for a military coup d'etat to prevent the Cameroonian people's desire to change, already perceptible in the massive voter registrations from being fulfilled in 2025 by the CRM. Here is a self-proclaimed steamroller political party that is trying that is trying by every means possible to evade the elections, confirming the fact that it is nothing more than an attempt, an empty shell. Here is a self-assumed dictatorial regime that proclaims itself to be democratic, claims to be eternal, and has been reduced to thinking that its survival depends on a military coup d'etat, which it is signaling could be a perfectly acceptable option to its eye. And I'm now going to say some few words on that issue of call for a military coup d'etat in Cameroon. Several public statements by CPDM dignitaries and official representatives and by certain opposition political actors suggest that in addition to the electoral coup on the way, individuals and organizations are also preparing a military coup d'etat in Cameroon. During the Droit de Réponse program in Equinox Television on Sunday, 3rd September 2023, the CPDM representative, to the surprise of the other panelists, called for a military coup d'etat in Cameroon if the CRM, Cameroon Renaissance Movement candidate, won the next presidential election. On 4th September 2023, one day after this serious public outburst, another CPDM official published similar remarks on his Facebook account. He declared, unquote, "In the event that by some miracle the CRM should win a presidential election in this country, there is bound to be a coup d'etat. The army will never accept having as its commander-in-chief a leader of a party that has been calling its name for several years. The truth is that the only condition for a coup d'etat in Cameroon is for the CRM, Cameroon Renaissance Movement, to win a presidential election. The army will never agree to submit to a party that has regularly called it a Bulu militia, a tyrant's militia, and a Biya soldiers." End of quote. On 5th September, the same CPDM officials published the following message in the Facebook on his Facebook page. Quote, the UPC, the PCRN, the AFP, and others have never insulted the army of this country. If one of these parties wins the presidential election one day, the army will put itself at the service of its leader. On the other hand, if it is the CRM, Cameroon Renaissance Movement, or a party that has invested the president of the CRM that wins, there will automatically be a coup d'etat. End of quote. No public prosecutor found that these public calls for a stupefying coup d'etat constituted any threat to peace. The CRM has lodged a complaint against those individuals, but to date, justice is taking its time. The day after our our party's convention, and thus the declaration of my candidate, the Alliance for Political Transition, ATP, burst into the media scene with the main objective not of defeating the future CPDM presidential candidate, but rather of opposing the CRM and the PAC. More seriously, this heterogeneous coalition is opposed to the holding of elections, preferring the establishment of a transitional government led by the CPDM. According to some political actors of that APT, I quote, in all objectivity, political transition has become indispensable and inevitable in Cameroon. The question now is the nature of the transition, military or civilian. End of quote. You can see the scenario from here. Sensing a crushing electoral defeat coming, they want to take the shortcut of a military coup d'etat to organize a political transition, then restore the regime rejected by the Cameroonians who gave the CPDM a chance for over 40 years. And here we go again, another 50 years of the CPDM regime, a regime of loss, tribal division, fratricidal wars, and national debasement. The government's silence in the face of all these serious facts is astonishing. It is so quick to violently repress imaginary threats to public order and state security arbitrarily attributed to the leaders and militants of our party, and even to have them sentenced to heavy prison terms. I solemnly warn those who, realizing that the political rupture with the Cameroonian people is complete, are fomenting this military coup. This is a bad scenario whose actors are not familiar with the deep history of Cameroon, nor do they take into account the current state of the country and the world around. The Cameroonian people will not tolerate such a travesty. You have to be a stupid dreamer or blinding arrogant to believe that you could open a Pandora box in Cameroon and nothing will come out of it. If you keep throwing the devil in the wall, he will eventually appear. if you crack a machete in a gas compound or settlement, then nobody will escape. Don't expect you can escape. We all will die in flames. This is why I say to any soldier who might be tempted by such an adventure that they should quickly give up. They should quickly give it up, because Cameroonians are deeply attached to peace. They are so not only because of their political history, marked by hunting tragedies, but also in view of this very heavy human and material toll that they deplore in the pointless civil war that some have waged in the English-speaking regions of the country. This in no way means that they are incapable of indignation and anger. Above all, we must avoid pushing them to the limit and putting their back against the wall. No one will say that we have not done our duty as patriotic watchdog of the Republic. The Director General of Electoral and the members of the Electoral Council, as well as those who, refusing to choose their leaders peacefully and through the ballot box, publicly call on the military to perpetrate a military coup d'etat in the event of a victory for the CRM and the Political Alliance for Change in the forthcoming elections, risk plunging our country into a cycle of violence that no one wants and whose duration and lasting consequences no one can predict. There is an urgent need to stop any action aimed at vitiating the forthcoming election before it is too late. A recently published survey revealed that 87% of young Cameroonians are seeking to flee their country for lack of prospects. What's more, the National Statistics Institute has just revealed that 10 million Cameroonians live on less than 1,000 CFA francs per day, that only 58% of Cameroonians households have electricity, mostly in urban areas, because in rural areas the percentage may amount to 80% or 70 to 80%. The state's insolvency, orchestrated by lustre of the public purse, has ruined many small businesses and even some big companies. Thousands of pensioners have no access to their pensions several years after they have retired. Teachers and medical staff, devastated by inhuman working conditions and humiliated and scorned by the regime, are fleeing the country en masse, and the high cost of living is raging in households whose purchasing power has been totally eroded. Militants from certain opposition political parties are finding it hard to conceal their frustration and anger at the obstacle placed in the way of their political activities in the field by the Minister of Territorial Administration and his collaborator of the at the prefectural level. For example, the relevant division officers in the far north, more specifically in Marwa, has, on the instruction of the hierarchy, banned the CRM, the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, from organizing ceremonies to install the heads of our party in the region. It was the same situation in the south. But we know that it is the so-called elite, CPDM elite, the so-called CPDM elite of the region, of those regions, who are panicking. No doubt the same people who burned our party's material in Marwa in 2018. T-shirts, caps, scapes. I can tell them that we will no longer stand by and watch such tribalistic and lowly village barbarism happen again. Let them not doubt it for a second. In view of the above, the Economic Community of Central Africa, the African Union, the United Nations, Cameroon's partner, countries that claim to be friends of Cameroonian people, must act now to help our country avoid sinking into the violence being prepared by the regime's extremists and their allies in the opposition and civil society. In view of the above, I reiterate that all the international partners that claim to be friendly to our country should act now, until all the protests against democracy, peace, and the republic come to their sense. I invite Cameroonians to give them an exemplary political response by registering en masse on the electoral roll. I invite them to vote en masse to block all enemies of peace by all peaceful means possible. I thank you for your attention.